Today, I'm talking about the documentary film OHIYESA, The Soul of an Indian, directed by John Whitehead and Jesse Heinzman, and produced by Sid Bean. This film is available on Canopy via the DCC Ritz Library. I'd like to share my thoughts about the movie with you today. OHIYESA, The Soul of an Indian, is a powerful and thought-provoking film that provides a clear view into the life of a young Native man in 18th century America. The story of OHIYESA, an activist, author, lecturer, and one of the first Native American doctors, is narrated by Kate Bean, an Herb Dakota scholar and ancestor of OHIYESA. Today, in our podcast, we'll be taking a closer look at the Native American boarding schools that OHIYESA and thousands of other Native children were forced to attend. In the mid-18th century America, these schools were established to assimilate Native American people into American society. Now that sounds bad already, but the conditions were far worse. These natives were subject to what I would call torture. Many schools would cut the children's long hair, a big part of Native culture, and put them through many forms of abuse and violence, which we will get into detail in this podcast. With the Indian Removal Act of 1830, the U.S. forced Native American tribes to move from their home territories to make room for U.S. expansion. Not only were Native Americans physically removed from their houses, but Indian boarding schools attempted to erase Native American culture and identity altogether. The first of these schools was built in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by U.S. Cavalry Captain Richard Henry Pratt, who, to this day, symbolizes the brutality of the boarding school system, and who delivered the words, "Kill the Indian in him and save the man." The school was built in 1757, and over 7,000 Native children were forced to attend the school, and more than 180 children died while there. However, the U.S. government paid no mind to the atrocities going on within the walls of the school. The school finally closed in 1918 and was used to care for wounded soldiers during World War I. The film also tells that story of OHIYESA's experience with assimilation and boarding schools. OHIYESA was living his life hunting with a tribe of Dakotas and his uncle, Mysterious Medicine, but at the age of 15, two men approached him and told him that his father, Jacob Eastman, whom he thought was dead, was actually alive. He had converted to Christianity and wanted his sons to learn the ways of American civilization, saying that the English language and books were the arrows of the white man. He was given a new name by the preacher, and that name was Charles Eastman. OHIYESA's words, narrated in the film, explained, "The preacher told me I was going to choose a new name, and produced a little book. Of course, I couldn't read those names. So he concluded the simplest way was to have me point, which I did. It happened to be Charles." The next morning, his long hair is cut and he starts school in Flandreau. Of this, OHIYESA has written, "I didn't want to go to that place, but father's logic was too strong for me, and the next morning I had my long hair cut and started into school." After Flandreau, OHIYESA attended a Native American boarding school in Santee, Nebraska. Here, OHIYESA was stripped of his culture, language, and identity. The Santee Normal Training School was founded by Alfred L. Riggs from 1820 to 1923. The school had an enrollment of 2,398 people. These schools were known for the regular abuse of the children attending, either for using their native language or not complying with the way of life being taught to them. Children were often torn apart from their families. Federal investigations found at least 973 died in federal Indian boarding schools in America from disease outbreaks like tuberculosis and measles, even freezing to death in their beds. This was government-funded torture. After reading Native Americans, Boarding Schools, and Cultural Genocide by Becky Little, I learned about the sexual violence these children would pursue as well. Little writes, "There are thousands of Native Americans in both the United States and Canada who never returned home from boarding schools and residential schools. Their small, bruised, and broken bodies yet unaccounted for. There are even reports of children who were murdered while still newborns, that their families never even knew existed. These babies, who died without names, were the product of rape when priests assaulted girls. The souls of these murdered children cry out for justice." OHIYESA, The Soul of an Indian, brings justice to these people who suffered by sharing stories of boarding schools. More attention should be paid to this subject, and more films like OHIYESA should be made, because more stories are yet to be told.